So this is going to be just a quick demo of some of the code I will be showing at FOSDEM. But the story here is really the last couple of weeks. So when I try to introduce a new technology to a team, I always try to think about how to lower the cost of introducing the specific technology. And I've been working with Dagger for the last couple of months now. Obviously, I have some base knowledge about it. But when you introduce a new technology to your team, obviously they don't. And to make the transition, for example, switching CI from something to something else, to make the transition easier, you need to lower the cost and make it easier for everyone to understand what's going on. And to give you an example, this is a simple library I wrote to back in August, actually, when everything was still in queue. This was a simple library to showcase how Dagger works with a simple Go library. And this was the example, like the counter example of the CI and GitHub Actions, how that works with GitHub Actions. And there was another, you can see there is a Dagger workflow here as well for showing how Dagger works. But basically, the simplest form of a CI pipeline for a Go application on GitHub Actions is obviously you need Go, and then you need to check out the code, and then you need to run some sort of test. And if you work with Go, you are probably familiar with the Go test tool or the Go tool in general. And really the easiest way to introduce a new tool is to replicate the same or similar interface to make it easier for people to understand how the thing works. And if I go back to how the original Go test code for this library look like, so you can see that this is probably familiar, but you can see that there is a lot of Dagger specific code here. There's a container for Golang, setting a bunch of Golang specific and Dagger specific stuff here. And then there is Go test command at the end. And obviously for me, and probably a bunch of you, this is familiar, you understand how this works. But if you want to introduce this whole thing to a team who doesn't know anything about Dagger, this is probably confusing, and it's a lot of code. And if you want to introduce Dagger or any other tool into a lot of new places, copying all this code takes a lot of time. Changing the code to tailor make it to that specific project takes some time. So it would be nice if we had like a little bit simpler interface, similar to this, for example. So what I did is I actually wrote a library, and let's check that out here. That simplifies things a bit and creates a more familiar interface for working with Go in Go. And this is, again, this is specific to Go, but writing a library like this is absolutely possible for other languages as well. So instead of writing a lot of Dagger specific code, now you have an interface that's a little bit more similar to how you would write a Go test command. You have a bunch of Go test specific code here, and then you basically just create a container. I will show how the library looks like just in a minute. So basically, you just create a container and just run it as you would with any other Dagger container. But here, the configuration itself is more similar to how you would configure just a simple Go test command. So you have a bunch of options here, just like in this case, you can specify, for example, coverage configuration, or you want to enable the race detector. You can simply just add Golang.enable race detector. And the good thing about this is that the documentation itself is available on go.dev. So this is a Go library. So if someone writes Go, it's going to be easy for them to understand how this works. Now, let's take a quick peek at the library itself. By the way, this is on GitHub, so let's actually open So the name of the library is Go CI. It's pretty simple at this point. Let me quickly paste this into the chat if I can. So basically, a couple of features of this library right now, you can easily write a test step for your pipeline. There is also a Golang CI integration. So if you go back here, you will see that the Golang CI integration is pretty similar to how test works. There's not a lot of options here. They want just the Go version. But basically, it's very similar to how the test step works. And again, instead of writing a bunch of Dagger and container specific tools here or code here, you can use an interface that is more similar to how you would just write a Go command or a Golang CI command. And the idea here, obviously, this is pretty easy to write. The idea here is that all this code has been extracted to a reusable library, which is not just testable, but easy to use and easy to introduce to any kind of CI pipeline that you would want to build. So I'm trying right now to use this library in simple Go libraries as well as in more complex Go projects. But the idea is that all those steps that you want to write in a pipeline has like a higher level interface compared to just using Dagger. And that should be more familiar to developers who are familiar with Go code and Go tools. The next step, and this is something I still want to build for FOSDEM, is actually building the pipeline feature into the library. So right now, if I go back here, you can see that I still use Mage, and these are simple Mage steps. Like if I just want to run a test, I can quickly go and run test here, and it will run a single test step. Now, and that works great. Now, if I go back here, you can see that a CI pipeline may have a bunch of other steps, for example, upload coverage information. So the next step for this library would be to add that feature and actually build the interface for the pipeline itself. And this would be something similar to what Nick Jackson showed in a couple call earlier, where you can go through a bunch of steps. And instead of adding like conditionals to those steps, there would be some sort of pipeline orchestration code that decides whether you can move on to the next step. And similar to how it works with GitHub Actions, actually. So there is this if always line here, which means that even if any of the earlier steps fail, the pipeline should still reach this step and try to upload the coverage, because we might have a coverage file for failed tests even. So the next step for the library itself is to build that pipeline feature where you can combine multiple containers and multiple steps easily. So you can just replace this whole thing with a simple Dagger execution. Another thing I want to build into that is a build matrix. So the other another thing that you can see here is that we run tests for multiple Go versions. That's often true for Go libraries. Not so much for applications, but for libraries, you need to run tests against multiple Go versions. So that's something I want to be built into this library as well. Now, this is all good, and it will probably help introducing Dagger into a bunch of places, not just for teams who are not familiar with Dagger, but probably into libraries, open source libraries or smaller libraries who don't really, where people don't really have the expertise to learn something entirely new, but they just want something simple instead. One thing I realized while building this library though, and hopefully once the extensions feature becomes available, some of this library may actually become obsolete. But while building this library, I realized that what if I have, for example, a full stack application with both Go and TypeScript in it, and the rest of the pipeline is written in TypeScript. Now, what if I want to write the same thing for Go? Now, I would have to re-implement this whole library in TypeScript, or maybe I could just write parts of the library or parts of the pipeline in Go, parts of the pipeline in TypeScript, but that's probably not ideal. So hopefully and that's why I'm hoping that the extensions feature will become available soon, because most of the library could actually become an extensions to Dagger, and then I could just use these features as extensions without writing a whole bunch of this high-level interface on top of Dagger. So I'm really looking forward to that. Other than that, I think this is a good start, and I'm actually looking for some feedback. So if anyone wants to try this or add some features or give some feedback about the interface, please do.